On Tuesday, the so-called Trump War Room, they have an account on X, which is run by the Trump campaign. And it put up a totally racist image that suggested if Kamala Harris is elected president, American neighborhoods will be overrun with hordes of screaming, violent black people and immigrants. Here they come. Look at them. Ah! Jesus Christ. The tweet read this: import the third world, become the third world. And what it showed was an image of a nice, quiet, suburban neighborhood, which when you look at it, and when I looked at it, just like white people, white people, white people, this suburban neighborhood. Now, there are no people visible in this image, but it juxtapositioned that with a photo depicting a huddled mass of scary black men crowded together on a city sidewalk. What were they plotting, huddled together? Well, obviously, rape, murder, burglary. Here they come. The essence of this tweet. And I might add, this is what Jahan Jones wrote this morning on MSNBC. He wrote, the essence of this tweet, that black people, perhaps black immigrants in particular, ought to be feared and rejected. The image is so grotesque and so old-timey in its racism that it takes you back to an era when such imagery was commonplace in mainstream American politics, the Jim Crow era. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you've done this, but I've done it. I have gone online and got into the Wayback Machine and taken a look at political ads from the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, posters, things that were put up. And the hideous, grotesque depictions of African Americans, of black people in this country. This is during Reconstruction. And then on into the Jim Crow era in the 20s, 30s, 40s. The caricatures of our brothers and sisters, black Americans, the caricatures were beyond grotesque. It was the same thing that the Nazis did in their characterization of Jews in the lead up to the invasion of Poland in the beginning of World War II. If you also go online and look at some of those pictures of Jews where they're characterized as huge river rats. I mean, huge faces with whiskers and chin beards and fangs. And in the American political system during Reconstruction, during Jim Crow, the same thing was done to black people. This is what Trump is about. Now, as Jahan wrote, whether it's this post or the signs at Trump rallies and the signs that were at the RNC convention calling for mass deportation now. Isn't that lovely? This is a fucking nation of immigrants. The indigenous people here, we eradicated, we being white Europeans, we eradicated, and the ones that we couldn't kill through forced marches or starvation or gunfire or burning them in their homes, the ones we couldn't kill, we forced into desert reservations and provided them with all the, fire water necessary to kill them all off when they hit their 20s or 30s or 40s. I mean, the record of American racism is so horrifying, so grotesque, so unavoidable, if you ever want to really confront American history, as to be possibly the one thing that could cause this country to stop dead in its tracks and just say, oh my fucking God, we did that? Yes, we did. Plus the cartoons that are shared by Trump and his followers that depict black people with, no matter what the pictures. They've done this to Kamala already. They did it to Barack Obama, where they darken the skin of the African American, because the darker the skin, the scarier that person is. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, look, a black person. And like I've said before, that's such an overt, sickening example of this kind of racism, because the truth is there are no black people in America. If you interpret or define the word black to mean black. I have a black T-shirt on right now. It's black. I look at it. Well, that's a black T-shirt. Yes, you're fucking right. It's a black T-shirt. Nobody looks like this black. Not even from tribes in deep African countries don't look this black. So the whole thing, black, you're black. Black, black, black. Black is bad. Black is evil. Let's darken up this not so dark person's skin. What we have done in this country where it concerns racism and division by certain people like Father Coughlin, this racist fucking anti-Semitic white man who claimed to be, well, he was a priest for the demonic Catholic Church. He was on the NBC radio network. NBC back in the 30s had two networks, the blue network, the red network. They didn't have the color designations that we ascribe to those two colors now. But the programming on each was different. Well, it's my understanding, I think I have this right, that Father Coughlin was on, and Rachel's written about this, that Father Coughlin was on the Blue Network. And his anti-Semitism got so fucking bad at a time when anti-Semitism in this country was easily accepted, that NBC finally had to get rid of him. And he was a Hitler apologist, as was Henry Ford, as was Charles Lindbergh, as was so many American industrialists. They just loved Hitler. They wanted Hitler. They wanted the Germans and the British and the Americans to form an alliance and fucking kill everybody else on earth or enslave them. But we were the dominant power, along with Germany and England. Yada, yada, yada. You know about this, I'm sure. So the Trump campaign is reviving that filthy, rotten American tradition of putting out there unmistakably racist and xenophobic imagery as part of how they try to win an election. As Jahan Jones said, the type of stuff one might expect to see in the Klan's fiery cross newspaper more than a half century ago. Now, it was something I want to make sure you understand, because I have to stop and consider this every once in a while. More than half a century ago, if you want to be literal, would be 1973. We're not talking about the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. We're talking about 1973 was more than half a century ago. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, huh? So when Jahan Jones says this is the type of stuff that one might expect to see in the Klan's fiery cross newspaper more than half a century ago, don't for a second consider that that's a reference to Reconstruction or the worst time of Jim Crow. He's talking about a time when you could turn on the radio and hear the Beatles or Pink Floyd or the Moody Blues or any of a number of groups that were white or black or a mixture thereof, a Grateful Dead. I mean, half a century ago. The point being here, the point I'm trying to make on that reference of more than half a century ago, it wasn't that long ago, folks. And even if you're 35 years old, you're thinking, well, fuck, that's before my lifetime. You have to understand how recent this shit is. And Trump is trying to drag us kicking and screaming back to the time when popular imagery of our African-American brothers and sisters was so vile, so rotten, so filthy, and so racist, as to the point that people now will relate to that and say, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like them old black bastards either. This is Trump. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.